great to have Katrien here, who's come to us from Belgium. She started off as a physicist, but found that too easy, so she thought she'd do something complicated. Went on to do a second undergraduate degree, which shows amazing dedication in sports science, and has gone on since to do research in sports science. She's currently a postdoc at the University of Leuven. Talking to her yesterday, her research sounded like all my dreams come true. So she does research with professional cycling teams. She does research with Australian rules football teams. She does research with professional football teams. She herself is a practitioner. She's a very good volleyball player.
I didn't say the very good part, but
no,
I did say the volleyball part.
So she's superb. But anyway, today she's going to be talking to us about athletic leaders and athletic performance. And well, I'm much looking forward to hear what you're going to say.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me today to present part of my work to you, so many thanks for the invitation. Would you have any questions in the meanwhile, just feel free to ask. So when we look at the leadership research so far, we see that almost all attention has been devoted to the coach of the team. The coach is only leader of the team. However, if we look at the definition of leadership, it says that leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. So that means that leadership is not only restricted to the coach, but also athletes within the team might fulfill important leadership roles. And given the lack of knowledge on the leadership of players within the team, of these athlete leaders, I decided to focus my PhD and now also my postdoctoral research on this athlete leadership. So remember that these athlete leaders can be both leaders who are formally appointed as being leaders, for example the team captain, but it might also be informal leaders who still can have a big influence on the team functioning. So this presentation will contain 4 parts. In the first time we will have a look like who actually takes the lead within sports teams. From these analyses it will appear that we will have to look further than only one person, which brings us to the leadership networks. Then, of course, the most important question is whether these athlete leaders actually can impact the team's functioning. And in the end, I will also show you a possible way of further develop these qualities of these leaders. So let's start with who actually is taking the lead. In this first article, given the very limited knowledge on athlete leadership so far, our first aim was to get an insight on the different leadership roles that players can fulfill in a team. And second, we also want to see what actually was the function of the team captain as the formal leader of the team. So we were lucky to have a lot of cooperation with the sport federations. So in total we had almost 4,500 participants who filled out our survey. There were both players and coaches active in 9 different team sports in Belgium, young, old, and active at all different levels. So both from the recreational level, competitive level, and also the highest level in Belgium. And in this study we derived at a classification, a categorization of athlete leaders. So actually 4 different leadership roles that players can fulfill. We have 2 leadership roles on the field and 2 leadership roles off the field. So on the field, first of all, we have the task leader, who's actually the coach on the field. He's giving his teammates tactical advice, adjust them when necessary, and giving them tactical guidelines. Next, we also have the motivational leader. So that's the leader who is the biggest motivator on the team. He can really encourage his teammates to go to any extreme. And also when they are very discouraged, he's the one that can bring them back into the game. Then off the field, we have the social leader. He cares for the good atmosphere outside the field. Besides the drinking, he's also the trust person. If they have any problems with them, they can always come to him. And we have the external leader. That's the one who does the communication or represents his or her team towards the outer world. So he does the communication with club management, media, sponsors, and so on. Now it is important to note that it's perfectly possible that all these 4 roles are occupied by 4 different persons in the team. However, it's also possible that one single person occupies the 4 different roles. And of course, then at first instance, we look at the team captain, because the team captain is seen as the formal leader of the team. And often coaches and players do expect from him that he gives tactical guidelines on the field, he motivates his team members, he cares also for a good atmosphere of the field, and also represents his team, for example, towards club management. So that's what we wanted to investigate in this first study. Is it actually the case that the team captain occupies all these 4 different leadership roles? Or there are also informal leaders who also play a role here. So what we did is we investigated the number of leadership roles in which the team captain was seen as the best leader. So who of you have like experience with the sports teams? Maybe played in the team yourself, or a fan of a team, or you watch on television like most of you. So you probably all have a good idea of what team captains might look like. So what would you think? In the teams of those almost 4,500 participants, in what percentage of the teams would the team captain was seen as the best leader in all these 4 different roles? What would you think? Just guess. No wrong guess is possible.
60, 70%? 70%?
60, 70. Who goes more? Or less? What do you think?
12%.
12%. Ooh, critical soul here. What else? Any other ideas? 30, yeah. In how many teams do you think that the team captain occupies 3 of the 4 leadership roles? So in one leadership role, another player could be the best leader, but in the other 3, he still has the lead. More or less? Go ahead. Don't be afraid.
More.
Yeah? Would there be also teams in which the team captain is not perceived as best leader in any of the roles? So not on the field, not task guidance, no motivational, not off the field, not caring for a social atmosphere, or not even doing the communication with the club board? What would you say? What would the percentage there be? Small? What is small? 5%. Yeah, we all agree with that, more or less. Well, these were the results. So actually, they mean that the team captain didn't at all live up to the expectations by the players and the coaches. So what we see instead of the 60-70% here, 12% was already closer, is that only in 1% of the teams, the team captain was actually seen as best leader in these 4 different roles, what players and coaches quite often expect from him. Only in 4% of the teams, the team captain was seen as best leader in 3 of the 4 roles. And of course, most noteworthy is that in 44% of the teams, so in almost half of the teams, the team captain was not perceived as best leader in any of these roles. So also that percentage was a lot larger than the ones that we and you apparently also expected. Of course, we looked at the different sports, but these results were very similar for all 9 different sports, very similar for males and females, very similar for the perceptions of players and the perceptions of coaches. And even for the competitive level, at which we expected some differences, because we thought, okay, at the elite level, they will probably more consciously think about their choice of team captain. We saw that percentage was also 39% instead of 44%. So also there, it's mainly the informal leaders who take the lead rather than the team captain, apparently. So our analysis really pointed at shared leadership. It's not one single person who occupies all 4 leadership roles, but leadership is really spread throughout the team, and it's different persons in the team that occupy the different leadership roles. Although it must have been said that there was one major limitation of this study, and that was we restricted ourselves to ask who's the best task leader, who's the best motivational leader, the best social leader, and so on. So what we couldn't know is whether the captain is actually only a formal leader without any real leadership responsibilities, or it might also be that the captain was seen as the second best task leader, the second best motivational leader, the second best social and external leader, and as such might be the best all-round leader after all. So we couldn't see that from this study, but the answer to this question lies in social network analysis, which allows us to map the entire leadership structure of the team. So that brings us to the second part of this presentation. And in this paper, we actually use this technique of social network analysis to map the full leadership structure in the team, which also allows us to compare the perceived leadership quality of the coach with the perceived leadership quality of the team captain with the quality of also possible informal leaders. So instead of asking who's the best leader, we now asked each of the players to rate each of their team members and their coach on their leadership qualities in general, but also on the different leadership roles. So we got 2 studies. While study 1 focused on leadership in general, study 2 focused on the 4 different leadership roles. So for each of these 21 participating teams, we made 4 different leadership networks. 1 task leadership network, 1 motivational leadership network, and so on. And if we take an average of someone's scores on these 4 leadership roles, we get a score or a measure for all-round leadership quality. And also here, if you look at the correlations between these different networks, they were only moderate, so they were not high, also meaning that also here in this study, different persons would occupy the different leadership roles. So our aim was now to compare the leadership quality of the coach with that of the team captain, with that of the real athlete leader in a team on a certain role. That could be the team captain, but might also not be another person, as we saw from the previous study. So the measure that we used for that is in-degree centrality, which is a network measure that is actually the average of the incoming ties, so the incoming perceptions of leadership. For example, if you all think of me of a very bad leader, then my in-degree centrality, which is the average of all those perceptions, will be very low. So the higher the in-degree centrality, the better a leader or a player is perceived as being a good leader. These are the results. I'll guide you through it. So in yellow, we see the extent to which the team captain is perceived as a good leader. The higher the bar, the better he is perceived as a good leader. In general, and specifically on task, motivational, social, and external leadership. In red, we see the scores of the best athlete leader. So that means, for example, for task leadership, the one who is perceived as best task leader. And in blue, we get the results for the coach. So what do we see is that both on task and external leadership, the coach scores a little bit higher than the best athlete leader in the team on that role. However, this result was not significant. What we do see is that the best athlete leader scored significantly better on general leadership, but also in motivational and social leadership in particular. So here again, these results suggest to coaches to not underestimate the power of their athlete leaders. And also points to a major limitation in the current literature, which only focuses on the coach when it comes to leadership and really underestimates the quality that athlete leaders can also have. And then if we compare the best athlete leader with the captain, we see that the best athlete leader again scores on all these different roles better than the team captain. Some conclusions with this first part. As we saw in Article 1, in the first article, in almost half of the teams, the team captain was not perceived as best leader on any of these 4 leadership roles. The second article puts the findings somewhat in perspective and points to shared leadership. It's the coach together with the team captain and together with the informal leaders who are taking the lead together, in which certainly the importance of the latter group, the informal leaders, cannot be underestimated. So it is clear that team captains cannot live up to the high expectations often put forward by coaches and players. Of course, this does raise questions to the selection criteria of the team captains. Who selects the team captain and for what reason? Maybe other reasons than leadership quality are at play here. And furthermore, it's important, who should we blame for these results? Should we blame the team captain themselves? Or maybe the problem lies with the coaches. Do they give the team captains enough guidance to become better leaders along the way? Or is it just they select the team captain and then hands off, go on, which is often the case, at least in Flanders. So we can conclude that coaches should pay more attention in identifying the right leader in their team. Not only their team captain, but maybe some other informal leaders are also important. And further develop their leadership qualities along the way. But of course, I can tell you it's very important to identify the right leader, but if that leader doesn't impact any kind of team functioning, it doesn't matter so much after all. So here we will look at the impact that these athlete leaders have on the team functioning. And more specifically, we look at the impact on team confidence, motivation, intrinsic motivation, and objective performance. And of course, as a sport psychologist, but I think even more as a social or other psychologist, you want to know what are the underlying mechanisms here, how does it work, and how does the leader actually impact these outcomes. So we'll have a look at that as well. To do that, we did 3 different studies. The first 2 are published, one in basketball and one in soccer, and I will also present you the results of a 3rd experiment, which we just finished the data collection for. So in this first experiment, we gathered the data from 102 basketball players. What we did was we divided them in groups of 5 players. So these were not actually 5 participants, but it were 4 participants and 1 confederate who was part of the research team. So that was a student of us, a very good basketball player, but the other players just thought that he was one of them. And together with the 5 of them, they participated in a free throw shooting contest. So what they have to do was the first player had to shoot 2 free throws, then the next one, until they all had shooten 10 free throws. So what was the idea is that we wanted our confederate to be the leader of the team. So to make sure that all the other players really saw our confederate as the leader of their team. So how did we do it? First of all, we chose for a highly skilled basketball player. So he was really good in playing basketball. He was also older than the other players. We gave him t-shirt with number 1. We introduced him also as the captain of the team. And if that was not enough yet, the teams also had to participate at a basketball quiz. So a quiz with quite difficult questions on basketball strategies, tactical questions, historical questions, but all about basketball. And we cheated a little bit there. And we didn't give only the questions to our confederate, but also the answers. So he could really show off in the quiz. And manipulation checks showed afterwards that really all participants really perceived our confederate as leader of the team. So then the next step, the actual manipulation, was that we manipulated the leader's expression of team confidence. So in half of the teams, the leader expressed really high confidence. So he was encouraging the other players, he was very confident body language. He was also verbally expressing his confidence that his team would definitely win the competition. Now in the other half of the games, we asked the leader to express really low confidence. So he had a very discouraged body language, hanging shoulders. He was reacting very angry and frustrated when his teammates made a fault. He was also verbally expressing his lack of confidence. For example, he would ask the experimental leader, come on, do we really have to keep on playing? Because with this team, you're never going to get it. And also manipulation checks showed that that was actually perceived as high and low confidence of the leader. So the actual design was we started with the quiz. Then we had 2 equal test sessions. So they both existed of exactly the same test in which each of the players was taking the 10 free throws. The only difference was that in the warm-up, the leader just acted neutrally, regardless of the experimental condition. And in the test condition, we, of course, distinguish between the 2 conditions. So in half of the teams, he acted very highly confident, and in the other half of the teams, he acted lowly confident. Of course, it's a possible confounder is the leader's performance. So if he wanted to perform better, that could also influence the result. So we asked our leader to actually score 5 out of the 10 free throws each time. And because he was actually so good in playing basketball, for him it was no problem and he could keep his performance exactly the same. And we had 2 questionnaires, one after the first test session and one at the end. Our aim here was to test the leader's impact on the team confidence of the other players and also at the objective performance, the number of shots that they actually scored. So regarding team confidence, we get this graph, significant interaction effect. So remember that in the warm-up, the leader acted neutrally, regardless of the test session. And then in green, we have the condition in which the leader acted highly confident in the second test session. And in red, when the leader acted lowly confident. And we see that when the leader acts highly confident, also the other players would get more confidence in their team. The other way around, if the leader acts lowly confident and expresses his lacking confidence that his team will win the game, then also the other players will be convinced that their team will lose the game rather than win the game. And of course, team confidence is important, but what really matters in team sports is the performance in the end. So here we looked at the objective performance, like the number of free throws scored in the first half and in the second half of the test session. And again, we get a significant interaction effect. So when the leader expresses high team confidence, we see that it not only impacts the team confidence of the other players, but also their performance. So they were actually going to score more free throws. And the other way around. So the leader can also, if the leader expresses negative confidence, then their performance would also decrease. So we see really a contagion effect in the sense that the leader's confidence spreads throughout the team, not only affecting the confidence of the other players, but also their actual performance. Not only in a positive direction, but also in a negative direction, which is very important. And also suggest coaches that you should avoid negative leaders at all times. Of course, there are some limitations inherent to this experiment. The first one is that we had no control condition in the second test session, as a result of which we don't know whether the positive effect that we found when the leader was positive, maybe that was also due to a learning effect, because they already did the exercise once, they just improved, they got better, and we don't know whether it was actually a consequence of the learning effect of either of the positive behavior of the leader. And another limitation is that we used the free throw shooting task, which actually had only very few interactions between the players. And it's actually this interaction that is really characteristic about team sports.
You invited questions as you go along, is that okay?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Do you know if it's the leader? Because you have a confederate, he acts in a negative way or positive way, but does he have to be a leader? You're right. I think if it is another person and just one of them, you will also have a contagion effect, I suppose, I'm not sure. But the fact that it's the leader, I think, makes the effect stronger. Yeah, but you're right about that, yeah. Well, the good thing is about these experiments that we can learn about the flaws of our previous experiments and design new ones. So that's also why we have so many of them. So in the next experiment, we tried to make these limitations better. So again, very similar design, however in soccer now. So we had 144 soccer players, and we used exactly the same way to ensure that our confederate was seen as athlete leader of the team. Now instead of the free throw shooting task, we chose for a highly interactive task, namely a passing task. So that means the first player started, so that was our athlete leader who started the exercise. He passed the ball to the second player, get the ball bounced back to the third player, and so on. In the end, he passes the ball to the beginning. The second player takes his place. All the players move a cone to the right, and the exercise starts over again, until all players have completed the exercise 10 times. So obviously now, they had to do the exercise as fast as possible. So time was here the performance measure. Again, similar design. We had a quiz of soccer in this case. 2 very similar test sessions, exactly the same task. In the warm-up, the leader acted neutrally, but now in the test session, we did not only have a high confidence condition and a low confidence condition, but we also got the neutral condition as a control condition. And also here we asked the leader to keep his performance exactly the same by doing his very best at each test session regardless of the different condition. And not only we tested the impact on team confidence and performance, but now also the intrinsic motivation, so the real enjoyment that the players had by engaging in the activity. From team confidence we get these results, very clear significant interaction effect. If the leader acts neutrally, both in the first and in the second test session, so the behavior of the leader does not change, we also get no change in the team confidence of the other players. When the leader acts highly confident, clear positive effect, and also the other players will become more confident. And when the leader acts lowly confident, also the other players will become lowly confident. Then regarding intrinsic motivation, pretty similar results, although now we got also significant result in the neutral test session, which can be a consequence of the learning effect. When the leader acted highly confident, again, positive effect. And the big difference now is when the leader acts lowly confident, also the intrinsic motivation of the players drops. And previous research already shows when the intrinsic motivation of a player drops, he doesn't have the pleasure anymore to engage in a particular activity. And that's also the first reason to drop out from sports. So it has already been shown that coaches have a significant impact on the dropout, but now it seems that also the behavior of athlete leaders can impact the dropout. And then performance, again, now the time to perform the task was seen as a performance measure. So the lower the time, the better the performance. What we see here is that when the leader acted neutrally, so in both first and second test session, we still see a significant improvement in performance.
This is the learning effect I was talking about before. So because they already have done the exercise a second time, although nothing actually changed, they just perform better the second time. When the leader is highly confident, we see a larger increase in performance. So then they actually perform better than when nothing happened. And when the leader acted lowly confident, we see no significant change, what means that the learning effect that is there was counterbalanced by the negative impact of the leader. So actually pretty similar results as the previous experiment. Then in this last study, the aim was to get a more externally valid experiment, so make it more closer to the reality. So instead of just making teams of 5 players who didn't know each other, put our confederate there, the players haven't seen him before, we now decided to start from real existing sports teams. And the idea was there that we wanted to use the real athlete leader who was already in the team. To know who that was, we started with a social network analysis beforehand. We mapped the full leadership structure of the team, and we then, because we knew who the real athlete leaders were in the team, we designed teams of 5 players such that we had 1 athlete leader and 4 players who really perceived that player as their leader. And now our confederate would act as the coach of the team, so we could also compare the impact of the coach with the impact of the athlete leader. Instead of the free throw shooting task, again, we now opted for a highly interactive basketball task. So the idea was that player 1 would start with passing the ball to player 4, he would pass the ball back or further to player 3. And once player 1 gets the ball back, he goes for a layup and tries to score. Then he gets a new ball, dribbles along the cones, and then take a free throw. So each time they would take both a layup and a free throw. So their aim now was to do it as fast as possible, but also as accurate as possible. Because for each missed layup or free throw, they would get 5 additional seconds in their time. So again, in the warm-up, no interventions. And now in the test session, we distinguish between 4 different experimental conditions. In the first one, we asked the coach to give positive feedback. So this all was focused on giving positive feedback, showing high confidence, because it wouldn't be so realistic if the real athlete leader of your team suddenly becomes very negative. In the second condition, the coach would ask the athlete leader of the team to really express more team confidence, be more positive. Then we have a combination condition, and both the coach provides positive feedback and he would ask the athlete leader to do so. And we got a neutral condition in which neither the coach provided feedback and neither the athlete leader was asked to provide feedback. And again, we tested the impact on these 3 outcomes. With regard to team confidence, we get the following graph. Significant interaction effect. When the leader acted neutrally in both test sessions, we see no difference. And then for all 3 other conditions, we see a significant increase. No particular difference between the different conditions. So it is very important that someone provides the positive feedback, but whether it's the coach or the athlete leader or both, it doesn't seem to make so much difference. Motivation, very similar figure. Also here, no significant difference when the behavior of the leader didn't change, and a positive significant difference in all 3 other conditions, with no particular differences in condition. So it seems also here that the importance of the athlete leader is of a similar strength than the importance of the coach. And regarding the performance, again, now the performance is the time that they needed to perform the exercise, plus additional 5 seconds for each missed free throw or layup. Significant interaction effect, no change when the leader didn't change his behavior, but we got a significant improvement in all 3 other conditions. Although now we should know that the combination condition is significantly better than the coach condition, which means that if the coach also asks his athlete leader to provide positive feedback, they will actually perform better. So again, this is a suggestion towards coaches to use their athlete leaders more, because in the end it will improve their team's functioning. But of course it's important to know how this impact actually works and what is the underlying mechanism beneath it. So for that we use the social identity approach as theoretical framework. And this theory asserts that you can define yourselves in terms of your personal identity or in terms of a social identity. So if you would define yourselves in terms of your personal identity, you will think about all the characteristics that makes you a unique person, that differentiate you from all the other ones. Whereas if you define yourself in terms of a certain social identity, you will define yourself in terms of a certain group membership, and you will really think and behave in terms of what a group member should behave like. For example, if we take the example of Vincent Kompany, which is a Belgian soccer player, if he would define himself in terms of a personal identity, he would think about himself as a man born in Belgium, 30 years old, pretty high, and so on. All the things that distinguishes him from all the others. Whereas if he would define himself as a member of, in this case, the national Belgium soccer team, he would really behave like what a member of the Belgian soccer team should be. But of course, being a member of a sports club is only one of the different social identities that you can have. You can also feel being a part of an organization. You can be an employee in an organization. You can be a family member, be a father to your children. You can be part of a religious group or be a diehard Metallica fan. So you have all these different social groups where you can belong to. The idea is that when a particular social identity is salient, so when you really identify with a social group, you will not only think and feel in favor of that group, but you will also act in favor of that group. And of course, for sports teams, it's crucial that the people do not think in terms of their personal interests, but really do and act everything in favor of the group. So we would really like to have the high social identification with the sports team. And the social identity approach to leadership, designed by Professor Haslam, Professor Reicher as well, and Professor Plato, actually says that the leaders have a crucial role here, so they can really make people identify more with their team. They can really make that people do not longer think in terms of their personal identity, but also think in terms of their social identity. And not only feel and think in terms of the group interest, but also behave in terms of the group interest. So we are looking at the impact of the leader here. And what they actually, the colleagues of the University in Queensland and others showed is that effective leaders can actually impact the identification with their team. Not only in organizations, but also when it comes to sports teams. If you have good athlete leaders, they are able to increase team members' identification with their team. They are able to create a sense of us. And make people really feel being part of a team. Now, what we wanted to see in our research is whether this impact is actually the underlying mechanism which makes also the leader impact other team outcomes. So in this article, we looked whether team identification actually mediated the impact that leaders have on the players' team confidence. Before looking at the impact, I want here to make a difference between two types of team confidence. So we have collective efficacy and team outcome confidence. Collective efficacy is actually the process-oriented variant of team confidence. So that is the confidence that you have in that your team has the abilities to complete some team processes successfully. For example, that you will communicate a lot even if you're behind, that you can follow a tactical plan, those things. Whereas team outcome confidence, that is really having confidence that your team can obtain a certain outcome, so that your team can obtain, or that your team can win the match or win the competition, or so on. So this is the model that we provided support for. So we actually see that athlete leaders are able to create that sense of us, and because of team members would more highly identify with their team, they would also be more confident in their team's abilities and also in their team's chances to win actually the competition. This model was supported not only for the players but also for the coaches. So athlete leaders do also have an impact on the coaches' identification with their team, which also strengthened their confidence in their team and in their chances to win the competition. This model was also supported in the other experiments that we did. So this is the model that we got from the experimental study, the first one in basketball. And we see very similar. If the leader expresses confidence, he can create a sense of us, make sure that all the players are really feeling part of the team rather than being individuals. That means that they will be more confident in doing the process as well, which means that they will be more confident in actually winning the competition. Also here in the soccer experiment, very similar model and got supported as well. In this experiment, we also went a step further and added 2 variables. So this one, the perceived identity leadership. That's the way in which leaders are seen to create and shape a team's identity. So if the leader expresses team confidence, players also perceive it like he's shaping a shared identity, which then of course increases their own identity. And also in the end, these 3 variables seem to influence the performance. Which brings us to the last part, because now we know that identification is an important mechanism that make athlete leaders also impact other variables like team confidence, motivation and performance. We will use that for designing an optimal intervention program. But before showing you how it should be done, or at least what an example is of how it could look like, I wanted to start with a personal story of how to mess it up. Those are mostly the personal stories, too bad. So a few years ago, well, it was actually 2010, so that seems already a longer time ago now. I was lucky to be the assistant coach of the national junior volleyball team, and we had to play the European Championship, which was a 1-week tournament in Serbia. The problem was that 3 of our best players, which you see here at the right, were actually so good that they also had to participate in the national senior team. And at that time, the 2 tournaments were going on at the same time, so they had to go with the senior team. So we did not only have to miss their volleyball skills, which was already very unfortunate, but it also appeared that these 3 were really the natural leaders of the team. So suddenly we found ourselves with a lack of athlete leadership. We didn't think about it by then. The coach just appointed a new team captain without giving a second thought, and we thought, okay, we will be fine. However, in the middle of the tournament, the setter, which is a very important position in volleyball, got injured. She couldn't play anymore, so a second setter had to take her place. Although she was from a younger selection, she had the skills to do it, so at first instance, we didn't saw any problem. However, what we didn't reckon on was the negative impact of the athlete leader in this case, the team captain that we have appointed. So on the evening before the next game, some players came to my room and said, "Oh, Katrien, what will we do? Because without that setter, I mean, we will lose every game from now. It will be terrible," and blah, blah, blah. And I was really surprised because I had no idea that they somehow lost their confidence. So I was saying that it was no problem. The second setter was really a good player. She already had showed in the past that she had the abilities. So there was really no problem. And then they told me, yeah, but our team captain already expressed that she totally didn't believe in it anymore. So if our team captain doesn't believe, how should we? And then I was like, yeah. It was too late to do anything about it because the next game was already the next morning. But it did have a significant impact on our performance. So it was indeed a terrible tournament, the rest of the tournament, which was not the fault of the setter, who actually performed really well and did a good job. But the other players really performed bad because they already had lost their confidence halfway the tournament. And of course, yeah, the tournament was terrible, which was very unfortunate. The good thing was that I got a lot of good ideas for doing my PhD then on the same topic, because I realized the importance. And it was only afterwards that we realized, like, okay, we could not blame the team captain for this, because we knew in advance that we were appointing someone without any leadership skills, without any previous leadership experience. So what we should have done, instead of just appointing her and thinking and hoping everything will be fine, we could have prepared her on the job. Or the least thing that we could have done was throughout the tournament, follow her up, prepare her on any unforeseen circumstances like this injury, how to handle it, how to communicate to the other players, and so on. So it is very important not only to select a certain leader, because I also think there were no other better leaders there, but the least thing we could have done is more developed her leadership qualities throughout the tournament. So how can things be done better? At least we hope so. It's 3 important things here. The first step is identify the right leader. Maybe you should look further at... Didn't do anything. Well, we see. You should look further than the existing team captain, but maybe other players in the team are more important as a leader. You should formalize them so that they know who the leader is and that they can take responsibility when it's necessary. And it doesn't stop with the identification, but you also have to further develop their leadership competencies. So I'll give you an example of 3 elite Australian football teams where we are running the program right now. So these are all very preliminary results, and we are now at the moment trying this out with these teams. We have the Cowboys, North Queensland Cowboys. They won the championship of the rugby league last year. And then 2 Australian football teams, North Melbourne and the Brisbane Lions. So what we did for each of these teams is we made the 4 different leadership networks. So a task leadership network, motivational, social and external leadership network. To see the leadership structure in each of these 4 roles, not only on the field but also off the field. This is, for example, an example of the task leadership network of the Cowboys. So what we see is the more central and the bigger the node, the better the leader is perceived as a task leader in this case. So the red nodes are the staff members. So we see that they are all pretty central in the network, which means that they're all perceived as pretty good leaders by the players. And in this team, player 5, player 20, and player 25 were seen as the best athlete leaders or the best task leaders. So this graph gives us even more information. I'll guide you through it. So what we base ourselves is the perceptions of the other players. Because of the perceptions of the other players, if they don't perceive someone as a leader, they will also not follow their guidance. If a coach appoints someone who he is thinking that's the perfect leader, but all the other players in the team says, oh, he's not a leader at all, yeah, of course his leadership cannot be effective. So you see here player 25, 20 and 5 were perceived as being the best leaders in the perception of the players in green, but also in perception of the staff members here. So here they really matched. And furthermore, we also looked at their motivation to fulfill that task leadership role, which was for all 3 players very high, and that's also very important. So in this case, we decided to not work with one leader on each leadership role, because if that leader is sick or gets injured or is not on the field, then you would not have leadership at all. But instead to work with leadership teams. So we formalized it and we put 3 players together in the leadership team. We did that not only for task leadership, but also for motivational, social, and external leadership. And we have the feeling that if you formalize these leadership roles, that players will not only know that their leadership is accepted by the other players, but also expected. So on difficult times, they know that they reckon on the fact that you are taking the lead on a certain role. And it makes them much more motivated and much more committed to do their leadership role really good. So some preliminary results. What we did is we looked at the 3 teams and looked at the quality of their leadership team. So of the 3 best task leaders in each of the teams. For task leadership, motivational, social and external leadership. And perceived both by the players and both by the staff members, because it could be that there are some differences there. And what we see that the first team, which was here the Cowboys, scored the highest on each of these different leadership quality teams. So their athlete leadership was the best in each of these 4 roles. Followed by the second team and followed by the third team. So what we wanted to do is to see whether we could relate the quality in their leadership teams to some outcome indicators. So here we listed some indicators of team effectiveness, which is having a shared purpose, being committed to achieve the team's goals, having a high team confidence, having a task-involving climate, which means that the players would work together to improve each other, and having a low ego-involving climate, because such a climate is characterized by a lot of intra-team conflict, and they wanted to compete against each other, being better than another, rather than competing against another team. So what we see is that also here, Team 1, the Cowboys, with the highest leadership quality on these different roles, scored the highest on each of these indicators. Furthermore, we assessed the subjective performance, so we asked players to assess their own performance and also the performance of the team. And we also asked the staff members to rate each individual player's performance. And we also saw that the first team scored best on these subjective performance measures. And in the end, we also had the objective performance ratings of last season. And you see clearly that the first team also, they won the final series and were ranked third in the season ranking. So they also had the best objective performance. And although it should be noted that it was a correlational study in nature, and these are only 3 teams, so we should be careful with interpreting the results. But still, they do confirm our previous result that teams with higher quality of athlete leadership leads to more optimal team functioning and a better subjective and objective performance. But of course, it's not only important to identify the right leaders and formalize the right leadership teams, but it's also very important to develop them further. And in this regard, we, together with Alex Haslam, Cliff Mallet, Nick Steffens and Kim Peters, the colleagues of the University of Queensland, we developed an athlete leadership development program, which is now carried out with each of these 3 teams. So I'll just guide you through what is actually in there. So the program consists of 5 blocks, 5 phases: the readying phase, reflecting phase, representing phase, realizing phase, and reporting phase. And each of these phases is actually centered around one main question: why does we matter? Who are we? What do we want to be? Becoming what we want to be, and are we what we want to be? So it's really built around the creation of a shared social identity, because we knew from our previous studies that this is the underlying mechanism that explains partly the influence that athlete leaders have on their team. So before actually outlining the crucial role of the athlete leaders in this program, I will just show you the content of each of these building blocks. So the first phase, the readying phase, it's a general introduction phase to the whole teams. So what we do here is just define them. What are the social groups? What are the different social groups you can belong to? And why is it so important that we want a high identification with, in this case, the football team? We also explain the importance of leaders in this process, how they can create and shape that shared social identity. But we do emphasize also that it's not only about the leaders, but it's really about all the players in the team, and that they will all have an important role in building up this shared social identity. Then the second phase is all about who are we? What is our shared social identity? What makes it different from being a part of this particular football team than being a part from another team? What are the unique characteristics that distinguish our team from all the other teams? And to define this shared social identity, we want to find out what players stand for, what does the team stand for. We don't want to look only at the social identity of being a part of the football club, but we also want to take into account all the other social identities. Because, as I said earlier, you're not only a part of the football team, but at the same time you might be an husband for your wife, you might be a father to your children, and all these things also take time. So they might get in conflict with each other. So the idea is to use the social identity mapping tool to map all these different social identities, start from there, and then build to a shared social identity for the entire team. Then the next phase is about representing what we stand for. So this is about making goals. What do we want to be? What do we want to achieve? And so in this phase, it's important to clarify the goals that we want to achieve as a team, and also identify possible obstacles that might come in the way, because it's important if you know them beforehand, it's also easier to do something about it. Then the fourth phase, it's about realizing, it's becoming what we want to do, or becoming what we want to be. This is all about making concrete strategies to go towards the goals, to achieve the goals. How will we achieve them? How will we do that? And also to overcome possible barriers in the process. And then the reporting phase, the final phase, that's actually an evaluating phase. So here we will see, are we what we want to be? So did we actually get that shared social identity? Did we achieve our common goals? Did the strategies work out? And so on. We also will assess the quality of the leader. How did the job of the leader go? I will come back on that in a minute. And what was the impact or the input of all the different team members. And the idea is that the information that you get here in the last phase can also be used to start the circle once again. What did work out? What didn't work out? How can we maybe develop different strategies to obtain our goals after all, and so on. Now the exact input of the athlete leader in the story. So the first phase, the readying phase, is just a general introduction phase to the entire team. But the other 4 building blocks, they consist of 4 different phases. So the idea is here, you know that we have established the leadership teams in each of these 4 different roles. So a task leadership team, motivational, social, and external leadership teams. We will gather all of them together. We would explain them, for example, in the reflecting or in the representing phase, that they had to make goals for their team. And we would ask them to go out to their team members and gather information about what the team actually wants to achieve. They would do that particularly for their leadership role. For example, the task leaders are asked to go out there, ask their team members about what the team wants to achieve specifically with respect to task goals. So for example, they want to play a certain strategy, they want to win the championship, and so on. Whereas, for example, the social leaders would go out there and ask for some particular goals with respect to the social leadership role. So for example, how can we integrate the new players well? How can we create a good atmosphere within the team? All those things. So the next phase is that they would all go gather the information of all the team members, so really a bottom-up strategy. Then they would come back all together, and together with their head coach, they would decide on the specific goals that they wanna have in each of these different leadership roles. And then these roles or these different goals would be communicated back to the team. So by using this really bottom-up strategy to engaging all the different team members, we really hope that they will also be more motivated and more committed to actually want to try and achieve the goals and do the strategies properly. So as a conclusion, we could say that these findings really point to the importance of athlete leaders. So we see that the team confidence expressed by these athlete leaders really spreads throughout the team and also affect not only the team confidence and motivation, but also the actual performance of their team members. Not only in a positive way, but only potentially in a negative way. So that's why it's very important to appoint the right leaders. We've highlighted the importance of creating a shared social identity and how this can function as a mediator also to explain all the other outcomes. And given the importance of athlete leaders, of course, it's important to get the right guy for the right job. It's therefore important to look beyond the team captain, remember the first study, and go more for a structure of shared leadership, in which leadership is shared throughout different people of the team. And of course, this identification is only a first step, but we would try to further improve their leadership qualities so they can build that shared sense of us, build a shared joint identity, and also improve their leadership qualities so they can further foster the team functioning. Thank you for your attention. So feel free, any questions? I'd say shoot. Yeah, go ahead.
I saw the mean age in some of your samples were around 14, 15,
Mm-hmm.
is that right? So how much older was your confederate or the team leader in most cases?
He was in his first year of the university studies, so he was about 18, 19 years old. Okay. So we chose by purpose the younger players because we really want to ensure that our player was seen as leader of the team. Now in the latter experiments where we really chose the leader from like who is actually there, then it doesn't matter anymore because they will perceive their leader because it's their actual leader. It was just because we really wanted the manipulation to work that we worked with a older player.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get the impression that coaches choose leaders who they think are weak because they see strong team captains as a threat to their own leadership.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Do you think that's
Mm-hmm.
is that a genuine threat to coaches, or perhaps should they be more trusting?
Yeah, might be. I think though in most cases they just don't think enough about it. So we did also some studies to look what are the reasons behind the selection. Why do they choose for it? It seemed that mostly the coaches made the selection of the team captain. So it's not the players that have a say in the decision process, but mostly the coaches that make their choice. And it seems that the informal leaders were scoring on all the different leadership qualities better than the team captain, except for one, and that was team tenure. So the number of years that the captain was actually in the team, and I think that is a very important indicator of why the team captain is selected. If I look at my own team, when I was playing on a pretty high level, and if I look at our team captain, she didn't fulfill any of these 4 roles. I always thought I was the exception until I did the study, and it didn't seem so much to be the exception. And our team captain, she was playing in the team already for like 16 years. There was never the question like, should we assign a new team captain or not? It was just, she was it, and that was it. And it was only when she had to quit the team, so she was asked to quit the team because her level was not good enough anymore, that suddenly the question popped up like, oh, team captain, oh, now we should assign our team captain. So, but it's like, it's very, very difficult because in that situation, I also had my highest trainer degree, so it was logical that like tactically I know more about it than, for example, her. So the coach would come to me in that case and like discuss some tactical issues. But for me, it always felt very, weird because it was like stepping over the team captain because she was there, and it's not logical that the coach would come to me because he had to go to the team captain, and also for other players it was kind of a problem. So I couldn't really provide my leadership very well, and it was only after a while when I actually became the team captain, I realized the difference when your leadership roles get formalized, how much better you can actually do it. So I think it's not really the problem that the team captains doesn't score high, but the thing is that all the players and coaches expect it from their team captain and therefore will not do it themselves. So it's better to have these different leadership roles and formalize them so everyone knows and will take up responsibility when it is necessary. Yeah.
Can I ask specifically how you tested for the creation of a sense of shared identity in the team?
Yeah. Well, we just asked the question like to what degree that they would identify with their team. Yeah. So
did you find that it increased then? Was there before and after?
Yeah, indeed. So when the leader would express team confidence, they would also get a higher identification with their team compared to beforehand, and that would lead to having more confidence in the process, in the results, and to a better performance.
Okay. And the way that you went about achieving the sense of shared identity in the team was the 5 R's, is that correct?
Yeah, the leadership development program. Yeah, that's a way in which we try, like by building, like by reflecting first of all, like what makes us, what are the characterizing attributes here of our team, and then also to develop goals and make a move in what we want to become and provide strategies to become there, that whole process would create a shared sense of what we are. And also because all the team members are involved in it, they would really get the idea, okay, it's something from us and not something that just the coach said, and now you have to highly identify with the team, because that's not really going to work. Yeah. So that was the aim behind it, but we are developing it now with the teams, so we will see how it works in practice.
Is there somewhere I can look at the detail of that?
Well, it's not yet written out. It's really very preliminary research. So for the moment, it's not more than this. I can send you out the presentation to get an idea for it. But it's now just being like fully detailed and fully developed at the moment. So I don't have any article about it too much. We do, however, we base this program on a program that Alex Haslam has developed within organizations. There is not a thing of the leadership in the different roles and the athlete leaders taking the lead, but it does have also the different phases. So that article might give you a little bit more insight, but it's also now in the revision process. So we just got a fairly minor revision, so I think it will be out there in a few months. So that might already give you a first idea of the content of the program.
Yeah. I was wondering about the magic of the number 3. Because I note that, so you pick the three people in each category. And that seemed to be supported by the data that you had. There were clearly 3 kind of people in that data that kind of emerged, or at least on the tasks data that you showed.
Yeah.
So I kind of wondered, I mean, so there is something kind of magical about the number 3.
No, it's definitely not magical. Magical.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I just wondered, because there are some,
No.
there will be some logical
No.
arguments why 3 is a good number, but you're
No.
saying it varies, and that was my question.
Yeah, definitely.
Does it vary from role to role,
No.
team to team,
Yeah.
size of team?
What we did here is just because we wanted to compare it over the teams, and it wouldn't be fair if you took like the first 5 leaders in one team and the 3 first, because of course that influences your quality. What we do normally if we make those leadership analysis for teams, it depends on a lot of things. It depends on the number of players in the team. It depends on their position. For example, it is good in like a football team or a team with a lot of players that you have, for example, task leadership in the front, in the middle, and in the back, like at all places of the field. So it might depend on that as well. It could be, for example, that 2 leaders are really seen as very good leaders and all the other ones are not. Yeah, then of course you would not go for 3 leaders. So it really it also depends on the different role. So for example, for motivational, the motivational leadership role, it might not be a problem to have more leaders because you can never have like enough motivation in the team. But when it comes to task leadership, it might be problematic if there are, like, for example, 3 attackers the leader and they all give different tactical guidelines, then those get in conflict and that wouldn't be a good thing. So 3 is definitely not the magical number. Yeah, maybe in other things, but not here. Yeah.
The kind of sleight of hand of the leadership effects. The leader has to have authority and capacity and knowledge and whatever in order to be respected. But then if the leader's, as you see, expressing low confidence, the team performance goes down. And if the team leader's expressing high confidence, the team goes back up. And you can always, almost in effect, you want the leader to be unduly optimistic because he or she's trusted. So then you're always going to have a beneficial effect. And this sort of, so how you get a team leader to express this optimism or confidence, I'm not sure, but there's an element of insincerity there, because in order to work, if your team's performed badly, you just need to express a positive outlook and everything will be better. So I'm wondering, there's this sort of undue optimism that you want to breed in there as well.
Well, it should still be authentic. I mean, if it really doesn't go well, it's...
I mean, because on the data you get,
Yeah,
teams get better
yeah.
if they have confidence.
But what you see, for example, from my experience, if everything is going well, as a leader, you don't really actually have to do something because everyone is optimistic, everyone is encouraging each other, giving tactical advice. But when it's not going well, then you see that, like, you get all those isolated individuals, they would not talk anymore to each other. There's no encouragement, no tactical advice giving anymore. And that's what a leader should try to, like, break and try to get a positive stimulus in it. So there it is important for a leader to...
I can see the mechanism that people, they if there's positive feelings, they kind of enhance. But I mean, what you're saying, when it's crap, you need the leader to just be optimistic and try to make people better.
Yeah, I think it's way more important if it's negative, and it's not that it's inauthentic, because he also knows that things are not going or not going good, but he will do everything about it to just, like, be positive and try to encourage the other ones and try to break all the isolated individuals.
It's a genuine bit, because I mean, yes, you've got to be encouraging, but you've got to sort of talk it better than it is. I don't know. I mean, it's just.
Or just if he is already the one that can stimulate the communication again, that might be a big step to do it better. And that's also the thing why we want to get away from the one leader. Because if you're there only on the field and you're the only one trying to fix it, it's probably not going to work. But if you're like with a leadership team and you take the responsibility, all of you, then it's way easier to get everyone on board.
That's why I was interested when you were talking about having a motivational leader, this person or people with, well, not undue optimism, but optimism. That's separate. I didn't quite get then what the athlete leader was.
Yeah, the athlete leader was just a general. So we manipulated. We asked like who is seen as the best leader in general on the field, and we did manipulate the extent to which he provided positive team confidence. So that would be like more the motivational leader, because he was the one encouraging the others. He was not really the one giving the tactical advice or doing stuff off the field. So we did use in the experiments more or less the motivational leader. Yeah.
Although I'm making criticism, humans are sort of suckers for encouragement, and so it's if it works, it works. But it just seemed that the recipe is talk it up when it's not good. Just
yeah, I think it might be better than talk it down at that moment. So.
But doesn't, I mean, in terms of the models of leadership and effective leadership, I mean, as you say, one of the criteria is making us matter in a sense. It's actually being effective, and sort of blind optimism. We're wonderful as you lose week after week after week.
Then it becomes
strategy. And I mean, in part, then it comes to presumably. Things like what changes do you make? What changes do you make in tactics? What changes do you make in personnel? What players do you drop? And what players do you bring in? I mean, so presumably confidence, it might be suitable in the short term, but I mean, clearly it's not the only factor. I mean, you do need
definitely.
And it can even be counterproductive, I would have thought, in terms of the third criterion of leadership in the long term. So I suppose, I mean, one of the things I wonder is, I mean, when you move from the types of groups you were studying, okay, to top level professional sport, okay, where there are all sorts of things which militate against shared identity. There are things like people being brought in for huge fees and being told, in effect, you're better than anyone else, which seems to be a strategy that our university believes in. That you solve problems by buying in superstar professors for very large salaries.
Yeah.
Now I know there's the work by people like Bloom and Hollander, which shows actually that doesn't work. It undermines things. It disrupts forms of shared identity.
Yeah.
I just wondered, I mean, if you had thoughts in applying your findings here to perhaps levels of professional sport where there are all sorts of fractious things which undermine shared identity.
I think these things you cannot think without it. It's logical that they're there, and you could not prevent them as well. But that's what we try to do with this development program, which is actually now applied with the highest level, just to make that the shared identity as well, besides all the individual factors and the ones who maybe make it more difficult to it. But still, if you try to create the sharedness, that will positively impact all the other things. But you're right, there are definitely factors, certainly at elite sports, that really focus at the individual. But besides that, it should still be important to get that shared identity there as well.
Because I mean, one thing is the question of, how good a player does the leader need to be? I mean, because you could argue on the one hand, the danger is that if the leader, is the superstar, then it's quite difficult to get them to have a sense of shared identity, because they're going to think of themselves as better. But on the other hand, if one of the criteria for being one of us is to be particularly good, then you need somebody who is good. So you see, I mean, you often see in things like cricket in particular, the balance which goes between the player who is a superb player who's made captain, who starts playing poorly, and so on. So do you have any thoughts regarding that issue of, in a sense, do you choose your best player as?
I think that's often a strategy that is adopted by many coaches, that they just choose, the best player and he's going to be the captain or the leader. But I think it's really unrelated. So it's not because someone is really a very good player that he actually can take the lead on several aspects. Certainly, because here we are looking further than only the task leadership aspect, but also to the other ones. And I know several very, very good players who still cannot guide the other ones in providing tactical guidelines, even that as well. So I think it's unrelated to some degree, however, because it is important as a task or a motivational leader that you're on the field. So if you're not good enough to be on the field, that's but that's like more a necessary condition. But from that, you don't have to be the best player to be the leader. But if all the players like perceive their best leader or their best player in their team really as their leader, it can give them some credibility. That is perfectly possible, but I still would have advised to start from the perceptions of the players. And if they don't think that their best player is a good leader, then I would never appoint him as a leader.
Any more questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
You recounted earlier a story about leadership that kind of failed. And then we saw how you can create shared identity and how you can develop leadership. So my question is, do you think you can take anyone who's on the field and make them into a good leader using something like the 5 R's?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter.
I think it's like not everyone can be a leader. You can develop leadership qualities to a certain extent. We did a big study now to answer the nature versus nurture question, like to what degree can a leader be made? And you see that there are some personality traits like extraversion that is also very important for leadership. And of course there are several behaviors who also really make the leadership quality. So I guess you have to have some basic ingredients, I'd say, and then you can develop from there. But if you don't have any leadership talent in you, it's not possible to become like the best leader. But you shouldn't be. I mean, you don't need a team full of leaders, because that wouldn't work as well. But I think you can improve them to a certain degree, and maybe a large degree, but there still needs to be some nature there.
Okay, well, it seems particularly apposite that in a talk on sport, where one rewards excellence, or excellence leads you to win a cup, to reward you with not quite a cup, it's a mug.
Woohoo! But it's all of you guys, all right?
Yeah.
We did it together. Yeah, very important.
So thank you very much. And,
Yeah,
and
thank
we're
you.
having drinks next door.
That's
to continue
amazing.
the conversation. But it's not amazing, I wouldn't go that.
I totally identify now with St. Andrews. Yeah, definitely. I have the cup, you know.
Good. Okay, well, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Nice.